Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. normally, but today being the trade deadline, we are on from 2 to 4. We're also on the main Sportsnet channel now, so it's different. So you gotta level up here a little bit. But anyway, I'm your host, William Liu. I'm joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong. Alex, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, man? Where's your dress shirt today?
This is not
we
dressed
dressed up yesterday for no reason. Both of us.
I was doing a courtside hit.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And then of course I'm also joined by our other producer, JR Manatad, who will be watching Shams and Woj's timeline for us. He got 2 laptops out, ready to go to break down any breaking news. As me and Alex are probably more busy discussing the actual news itself. What's going on, JR?
I'm doing all right. Just had to run across the hallway and grab my headphones because I forgot them. I'm out of breath.
What's the last thing that Shams and Woj have for us right now?
We got going on with the Sadiq Bey going to Atlanta, and James Wiseman is heading to Detroit. So Atlanta is sending Golden State 5 second-round picks in a 3-team deal.
That is the theme of the day. 5 second-round picks.
A lot of picks.
I think that's a historic thing because we have not seen that move before. We've seen the 4 second-round pick, kind of like the poo-poo platter, offered in the past. I think Nikola Mirotic was one of those guys who was able to be acquired by Milwaukee.
We've seen a top 55 protected pick.
We've seen top 55 protected pick, which is the most insulting way of trading somebody for nothing.
That's the Furkan package.
5 second-round picks is it's like pulling up to lunch and trying to buy it only with quarters.
No, that's truly your final offer. Like, it's your only offer.
Yeah.
If you're offering the 5 second-rounders. But lots of fireworks with the trade deadline late last night. You know, I'm sure we're going to get to Kevin Durant to Phoenix, but for the Raptors, they finally acquired your favorite, Jakob Poeltl.
It happened. It happened after us dissing on the show for like almost 2 weeks now, being like, we're tired of this trade.
Even yesterday, we talked about it.
Well, we saw him in Toronto yesterday.
We also saw him in Toronto.
Yeah.
And the Raptors sent Kem Birch, a 2024 first-rounder, which is, per Mike Scotto of Hoops Hype, is top 6 protected until 2026. And then 2 second-round picks this year, 2023 and 2025. What was your initial reaction just overall to this move?
It makes sense in the sense that, like, it seems like the front office wants to continue building on this current group, and they want to keep winning with this group. Obviously, they haven't necessarily been winning on the season because they're four games under 500 now. But
in the play-in,
they're sure,
at the moment.
But like clearly, this is like a buy-in to the current group, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that there can't be more moves made in the next 57 minutes here. But at the same time, like, the center position is something that has been clearly very weak for the Raptors. They don't have any centers, and they've been linked to Jakob Poeltl for a while. So I guess in that sense, I'm not surprised that the deal was made. I completely understand the reaction though, which has been kind of just people being underwhelmed. Not only just because of the fact that Jakob Poeltl is not that skilled offensively in terms of his scoring. Definitely a role player who does his role well. I mean, we don't have to necessarily dive too much into his game, although we will later, because of the fact that the Raptors drafted Jakob Poeltl and we had him for the first 2 seasons of his career before he was moved in the Kawhi Leonard trade. But, the excitement isn't necessarily there because I think that, the talk for a month leading up to the deadline is how the Raptors were going to go the other direction and invest more in the future and liquidate and move some of these pieces. And so far, we've seen the Raptors do the exact opposite. In fact, they've now given up another first-round pick to get somebody who can fix a positional weakness at the current moment. The trade onto itself, of course, you have to really determine it based on what he signs for in the offseason because you've now just traded for an unrestricted free agent, but you have his bird rights. Presumably, the front office is already, not to say that tampering ever happens in the NBA, but, that's probably already been worked out to some degree. And so it's similar to when the Raptors traded for Gary, for example, right? You trade for him with the understanding that you can re-sign him. And then, of course, you can roll forward with Jakob Poeltl being a solution at 5 for the next 2-3 years. I think using a first-round pick to address that makes sense in the sense that, like, that is how much it would normally cost. However, if you were of the camp that you want to see this team instead bottom out for 1, maybe 2 seasons, of course you're definitely going to be upset with the fact that they've given up some future draft compensation.
Yeah, no, this is clearly a win now move. I think obviously a lot of people, like you mentioned, coming into the deadline wanted to see the Raptors, maybe just punt on this season, go for the best lottery odds and then look more long term. I think the thing that people might be more upset about right now is like you look at the draft pick, which is not for this draft, but for next season, being top 6 protected, another clear signal that they're trying to win, not this season, next season as well. I guess it just kind of removes an option for them is the way that people are looking at it, is that the Raptors are coming into the trade deadline with all these different options of what direction they want to go. And this first move does seem to clearly signal that, like you mentioned, that they are trying to win in kind of the immediate and the now. And I guess the bigger question for other people then is like, oh, like how is it going to affect some of these other pieces that are out there? And I guess specifically more, the question I would have is like, what's going to happen with all the talks around OG, right?
Well, I mean, we can speculate about that, but honestly, like we're literally live sitting here reacting to everything. Obviously, JR is going to chime in if anything breaks on any front, especially from the major reporters. But I think we'll just have to wait and see. To be honest, like even as a show making process, it doesn't. I don't want to talk about it early right now because it could literally just happen in the next hour or so. And of course, when it happens, whether they make a move, what that move will be, or whether they don't make a move, we'll react to it then. But I think for the meantime, the acquisition of Jakob Poeltl, I mean, to me, the immediate question is, okay, now you have 6 players who can start, right? Now, if one of them moves at the deadline here in the next hour, this conversation is moot for now. But at the same time, is Jakob Poeltl walking straight into the starting 5 for you, Alex?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I think, and again, yeah, like you mentioned, like we're gonna see what moves are gonna be made in the hour. But I am interested to see like once you slot Jakob into the starting lineup, like what that does in terms of what Precious' role is gonna be moving forward. You look at a player like Gary as well. But I think when you're getting a player of this caliber, in Jakob, and you talked about just having to address this area of need at the center position, I think you slot him right into the starting lineup.
Yeah. If you now have him in the starting lineup and you know that Pascal and Scotty are going to be core fixtures, how is that front court looking for you? Because to me right now, none of them are solid shooters at all.
Yeah, I think that's why I want to see what else they're going to do, because they address this need. But you look at the team, like there's still a huge glaring need for shooting. There's a huge glaring need for depth, especially if you're looking to win for this season and going into next season as well. Like, what are you really adding to this group? Like, I think, they didn't have to trade a lot of talent on the roster going out, like shouts to Kem. But like, they still need to bolster their depth. And, I want to see what the starting lineup looks like at 3 p.m., depending on what they do.
Yeah. In terms of the fit for the Jakob in particular, I think that, we have seen now the Raptors play in the last 3 seasons without just a serviceable 7-footer. I think this definitely, ends that portion of it. And I think that for people who maybe weren't watching as closely to the Raptors in 2017 or 2018 when Jakob Poeltl was here, maybe they look at the situation as like, okay, do we have a 7-foot kind of like, stiffer kind of player? I think for me, watching a lot of tape on Jakob Poeltl this morning while everyone else was refreshing their timeline for Kevin Durant stuff, for us, we have to look at some Jakob Poeltl tape. And watching the tape, I think that it's pretty clear, and it's a good reminder of sort of what we saw when he was in here in Toronto. Was it's a very mobile big man. Definitely very good as a defender. Now, last season, I think he had an elite impact defensively. This season, he's having a good impact defensively. I think he's somewhere in between.
Okay.
Right? I think he's a pretty good defender. Right? He's not the best shot blocker in the league. He is not an average defender either at center. I think there are certain things that you can rely on from Jakob Poeltl in the sense that he's a really good shot blocker. He's a really good shot contester as well. Even just his mobility in terms of how he moves, he's able to flip his hips really quickly. And so when he has guys driving downhill at him, he's very good at staying in front and keeping a contest forward. This is generally speaking what you normally see from the tape. However, it has to be said though, one of the parts of that tape, I suppose, is what the game happened last night, where the Raptors literally played against Jakob Poeltl. What a funny situation that was. And yeah, obviously we didn't see any of that last night because the Raptors were able to either hit jumpers over him in the case of Pascal Siakam, or in the case of other guys, drive past him. We saw Scotty take him to the cup twice and score. We saw Fred take him to the cup and score a couple of times as well. So I don't know. Maybe thinking back to the reaction podcast from last night, I might have to change my third star from Scotty Barnes to Jakob Poeltl. But in any case, like I think defensively, this is definitely an upgrade for you at center. I think it offers you some other options in terms of how to play defense now, because the Raptors have been doing so much to compensate for the fact that they don't have shot blocking in the paint and no size in the paint, that they always send multiple bodies. Maybe we see less help, especially in the paint, which means less corner threes being left open. Because now you have somebody who can actually be back there and contest a shot and rebound and stuff like that. And I think the other aspect too is that's one way they can go. The other way they can go defensively is now that they have a shot blocker at the back, can you play more aggressive on the perimeter and play for even more steals, right? That's really a roster decision or a strategy decision that's going to come down to the head coach. But I think it's pretty clear that the Raptors have liked Jakob Poeltl. I think Nick Nurse even said pregame yesterday, without the tampering, but he was just like, look, we really enjoyed having him here while he was in Toronto. The Raptors liked Jakob Poeltl so much they took him with the 9th pick way back in 2016. That was actually, ahead of somebody like, Sabonis, for example, was available on the board at that time. They took him over that. They used the 9th pick with that. And then, they even took him over Pascal Siakam, who obviously turned out to be the best player the Raptors drafted that year. He went 27th. But, yeah, they liked Jakob Poeltl for a while. And, I think that they needed to – well, they felt the need that they wanted to fill the gap at center. And I think that they've at least done that. But at the same time, though, do we agree with that direction? Like, did you think the Raptors should have done this? Because I think for us, we've been talking so much about should the Raptors take a step back and try to rebuild. This is not a rebuild move.
I think, I feel like this is also a bet on where you think Scotty Barnes' development is going to go as well. Because the same conversation coming into this season about ramping up the expectations for this team coming off a 48-win season was the expectation that based on what Scotty was able to give you in his Rookie of the Year season, you expected a trajectory upwards and he was going to be ready to be part of a win-now team, right? And it's been an up-and-down season, I think, for everybody, Scotty included, the entire team. Obviously, we've talked about it at length. But if you're trying to create this window now and you assume you spend this draft capital to get Jakob in, and like you mentioned, he's going to be here on a new contract after this summer, is what does this team look like next year and who are going to be the key pieces? And, they're going to be betting on Pascal and Scotty to be leading this team.
Sure.
Regardless of who's still here past 3 p.m. today, right? So I think if they're looking to be competitive in the East for next season, then I think the expectations have to get ratcheted up on what you're getting from Scotty next season. And specifically what position or what kind of role is he going to fill, right? And I think that was a big question coming into this season as well. And I think based on what the roster is going to be constructed after today and after this summer, what is the role that you want Scotty to be in, and does those role definitions have to just crystallize quicker now versus having him on just this development path and playing him at different positions like a point guard and a center. And things like that. And obviously you bring in a more traditional center now to fill in this role. Maybe you envision more Scotty in that playmaking role, and then you have Pascal, as the lead guy. And then again, my question just goes back to what are you going to fill the rest of the roster with, right? Because if you're trying to compete based on what we've seen this season, is adding just a Jakob Poeltl and then betting on the development of the top guys and a Scotty and for Pascal to continue, playing at an all-star level, is that enough? Is that enough in the East? Right? If you look at the roster as it is right now.
Yeah. Probably not. Let's be honest. That's definitely not. But I think that they at least improve their roster based on this, right? Because clearly Jakob Poeltl is an upgrade over Khem Birch. Now, of course, would you have paid that price, right? Because, you do give up that future first, which most likely will convey next season.
Right.
And I think from the Raptors' perspective, what they're really hoping for is, okay, this year is what it is. I mean, if they make it to the play-in, that's great. If they make it past the play-in, that's great. But they're going to have their pick from this year no matter what. I think the other aspect is, okay, so next season, they really have to be in a solid top 6 position for me, for this trade to be something that makes sense, because otherwise you are giving them a pick that's going to be in the teens or even worse, or even better, sorry. So, yeah, you really have to, this has to work, essentially. And this is a bet on this group working. In spite of the fact that you've seen some of the results this season. I think to your point about Scotty and the role that he's going to play, I think it's going to be interesting because, this season we've seen Scotty play in multiple positions, including for a stretch there in December and early January where he played a lot at center. Now, of course, that's sort of positionally him playing center ended as soon as Precious Achua came back into the lineup and started getting healthy, because then Precious started to play much more of that center role. But, when you put Jakob in position, now all of a sudden you're taking away all the benefits or all the sort of positional lineup flexibility that you had with Scotty at center. Now, of course, Jakob Poeltl's a guy who's probably going to play like 28 to 30 minutes for you, right? So you still have another, 18 minutes or so that you can play with sort of smaller groups, and I'm sure that's where Precious will get some minutes at center, or Scotty might even get back some minutes at center. But it'll be interesting for me, because obviously that means that Scotty then needs to continue to work on the perimeter skills, just the way that Pascal has as well. But JR, do we have some breaking news or what?
We have some breaking news. We have a 3-team deal or multi-team deal for now. Clippers are sending Luke Kennard to the Memphis Grizzlies.
Okay.
The Rockets are receiving John Wall, so he's returning to Houston. And your boy Eric Gordon has been freed up and is going to LA.
Wow.
The Clippers get a nice little shooter that could probably put in off the bench. But yeah, what do you guys think of the deal?
That's a nothing burger. Sorry.
I'm thrilled for Eric Gordon, man. That's a former Clipper too, I believe.
Let me add that Danny Green is also in that Houston deal. He's going to Houston.
Okay.
Okay.
Some buyouts might be happening, I feel like.
That should be a buyout.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Clippers. Did you say Clippers got Bones Highland as well?
Clippers
was that
also
a
get
trade
Bones
that also
Highland.
happened, right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on the Nuggets, LA is also sending their 2024 and 2025 second round picks. So yeah, earlier today, before the show started, the Nuggets are trading Bones Highland to the Clippers. LA is sending 2024 and 2025 second round picks.
Yeah, and also Denver got Thomas Bryant earlier. Clearly with KD going to Phoenix, I think now a lot of these other teams who might have thought that the West was a wide open race now seem to be, they got to be chasing the Suns now. I mean, Suns adding KD. Like, you can talk about the wing defenders that they've lost. They've clearly given up. Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson. They lost Bossman 99. Shout outs Jay Crowder, but KD, Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul. Like, do you see them as I consider them the favorite in the West right now. I don't want to haggle about their depth.
Oh
and
yeah,
stuff.
no, absolutely. Are you kidding me? Absolutely.
That's a top heavy team right there. Like,
okay, Phoenix definitely has jumped to number one in the West for me in terms of on paper. I think that we'll see what Golden State does. I think they could still make a couple of moves here, and they really should. Right, I really believe in the continuity of that group. Obviously, Denver is pretty solid. Them taking Bones Highland out of the rotation before the trade deadline, and then ultimately moving him for some future picks, and then getting back Thomas Bryant. I'm not surprised necessarily with that acquisition, just because I think they've really needed to find a backup center for Jokic, and I don't think DeAndre Jordan was it. So I think that's a marginal upgrade, but at the same time, their rosters mostly stood pat. Phoenix is a real threat, especially with Devin Booker coming back. We knew that Phoenix was better than their record suggested, just because they had cratered with Booker out of the lineup. You add KD to that group. I mean, man, that is a. I'm a little jealous. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little jealous. I know we in Toronto we talked about KD and stuff like that. Literally Phoenix has changed owners in one day. That owner stepped into the building and he already got Kevin Durant in the building. Obviously he gave up a lot to do it, but to me, obviously Phoenix is going to be the team to watch in the West. But I think in terms of the moves that happened just now, with the Clippers adding in Bones Highland and them adding in Eric Gordon, to me that it's very clear to me that they're no longer a Fred team.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the reporting before was that the Raptors would want Terrence Mann for Fred, but I think they've made their moves now to kind of shore up the positions that they need, because John Wall was always being reported the last couple of weeks that he was going to be out. The team that I feel like losing the most out of this in the West is Memphis, because before all this KD stuff happened and even Kyrie going to Dallas, it really did look like the West was wide open.
Yeah,
even as Denver as a number one seed, you were not looking at them as a team that that you couldn't beat in a 7-game series, and this seemed like an open path for Memphis. And all this conversation about, do they want to consolidate some of their draft capital and assets to make one more move, bring in a vet or a depth player. But man, I look at Golden State if they make a move. I look at the Clippers, Phoenix obviously, and Denver. I feel like all those teams are ahead of Memphis right now to me.
Well, it is kind of funny thinking back to Josh saying, I'm good in the West. The West said we're good with you, man.
The NBA scriptwriter said, no, man, we're changing it up.
Yeah, no, but I mean, that's what I've been saying though. I don't think parity in the league is something that's supposed to happen. In basketball, like you just always see this sort of like star accumulation, and then you immediately see it with Phoenix making that kind of move. So now all of a sudden, the whole equation shifts, and other teams got to load up, and that includes probably how does that affect OG Anunoby, for example, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at Sacramento too, right? Like Sacramento was there in the number 3 seed, and now it's honestly hard to see. Like I feel like there is some distance now between teams you would legit consider that can come out of the West to the finals.
Right.
Like, so I don't know. I'll be interested to see if Memphis does anything because they're saying Ja Morant's gonna have to try to roll through the West with Dylan Brooks as his sidekick now. So
I mean, come on, man. Jared Jackson's there.
yeah. Triple J.
And now
the Block Panther.
Now they got Luke Kennard, which I think culturally might be one of the strangest fits. I can't wait to see Luke Kennard hit a gritty. Actually, it's gonna be very unsettling.
By the way, they're calling Russell Westbrook a vampire on the way out. This was reported by Dave McMenamin.
Yeah, I mean that's a little nasty business. There's no reason to do that. JR, what's going on, man? Is there any latest news or what?
We have another one that happening right now with LA Lakers are trading Patrick Beverley to the Orlando Magic for center Mo Bamba.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah.
They're also sending.
I've seen Mo Bamba photoshopped in the Lakers uniform.
The Lakers are also sending a second round draft compensation for Patrick Beverley. So that is also within the deal.
Okay.
You know what? Shouts to Rob Pelinka, man. He pulled off a couple of good deals. I feel like the last couple of days here.
I mean, again, like I think the Lakers have more ground to make up in the standings. But I don't know. That Lakers roster is starting to look like, at least on paper, much more complete. You go from Thomas Bryant, who offensively was definitely very capable and productive. Defensively, the metrics continue to say that he was one of the worst defenders out there at the 5. You bring in Mo, who obviously, if he really buys into his role and really protects the basket and stuff like that, I think he can do some stuff there. But just look at the trades that they made last night, right? The 3-team deal when we were watching the Spurs game with the Raptors, it was, Russell Westbrook getting moved. And, for them to turn that into 3, like, playable players in D'Angelo Russell, Vanderbilt, and also, who else did they
Malik
get?
Beasley as well.
Malik Beasley as well. Yeah, so that's not bad. Like, the Lakers rotation is actually starting to look pretty decent. Is that good enough to contend with some of the other teams or even propel them past the play-in? Who knows? But
first of all, half of the guys that LeBron celebrated his all-time scoring record with is like not on the team anymore. Like Juan Toscano-Anderson, he hugged, is gone.
Okay.
Beverly. And Thomas Bryant famously in that photo. I guess that's his famous last moment.
That's actually his last moment with the Lakers is begging for the duck-in.
I bet LeBron pretty upset yesterday because like he started the day, or at least in the evening, hearing about this 3-way trade, getting the upgrade that he wanted, getting Westbrook, out of that situation. And then he's got to hear about KD going to Phoenix 2 hours later. Because the whole premise for the Lakers being in 13th and being only like 4 or 5 games back of getting into the top 4 was this was a wide open West. But like we mentioned, like the landscape has changed, right? Like but I do want to give Pelinka a lot of credit because I feel like they've been able to thread that needle of like making these moves, not giving up. We always talk about the 2027 and 2029 pick.
Yep.
They only had to give up one in the trade yesterday. And there's protections on that converts to a second rounder. It's top 4 protected, which I thought was like, I actually don't know how they pulled that off considering they're dealing with Danny Ainge, who famously, just takes everybody's like draft assets. But like they're able to get these guys like D'Angelo Russell's a free agent at the end of the season. Yeah. Which getting his bird rights are important for them. They can make a decision on Rui Hachimura. Like they've been able to make deals where they've improved their team, not just for this season, right? At least you have a core there going into the summer where it doesn't feel like, there's nothing at the end of the tunnel for LeBron's whatever like remaining prime that there is. But if you're talking about this season though, I do feel like based on the way that things are changing now in the West, like there is a particular ceiling for the Lakers. Like can they get to the top 6? I think that might be tough for them.
Yeah, I mean, it'll mean, look, that's ultimately, I think, their goal. And I think they're comfortable necessarily just getting into the playoffs. How they do from there, it's obviously going to just depend on what level they can turn up from LeBron, who obviously has a different gear in the playoffs. And then obviously if AD's healthy at that point. But, I mean, yeah, that they've done well for themselves. So essentially they did free agency up front. Right? Because in terms of the money that they had, if they just let Westbrook expire, they could probably sign like 1 or 2 pieces. But in doing the deals that they've done recently, which is to get Rui Hachimura in the door, which is to get Russell in the door, like some of these players, like you can now make that decision on these guys, Vanderbilt as well. And it's like, if it really works out, you all of a sudden have the ability to sort of retain the team. Of course, it'll probably take you into the tax, but who cares, right? At that point, Lakers, you have LeBron, you're trying to maximize your situation. But No, I mean, I think the Lakers did pretty well for themselves right now, and we'll see. They might still add some more pieces. What's going on, Jared? Is there any more moves?
Just coming in right now, per Shams, the Pelicans are trading Devontae Graham and 4 second-round picks to San Antonio. This is included in the deal with the San Antonio Spurs trading Josh Richardson to the Pelicans.
Okay, this is another, I feel like, Fred VanVleet suitor off the table potentially. Maybe even a potential OG Anunoby suitor off the table, because I felt like Devontae Graham was always that salary that was thrown in to a lot of these proposals.
Because if you want guys like Dyson Daniels and like Herb Jones, you still got to make the money work, right?
So if you're telling me that this is some of their dead salary starting to move out, then
you tell me the Raptors might stand pat and Pirtle is going to be the only move.
So far, right now, with 20-ish or 30 minutes to go before the deadline, that's what it's looking like at the moment. But yeah, to me, this doesn't seem like. I mean, who knows? I mean, I'm sure they can work other salaries around it, right? You could probably use, for example, JV to do it. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for me to do that, right? I think, you would necessarily, especially if you want to make a deal happen for Fred, or if you want to make a deal happen for OG, you definitely want to use one of your players who isn't someone that you feel that you can play in a playoff rotation anyway, like a Graham. But that's okay. Well, if New Orleans is off the table, who else is still on the table? Because I'm seeing this latest from Shams, which, JR, feel free to interrupt us with anything involving the Raptors, okay? Because this is a big one right here, and we're late to this one. The Western Conference contender has emerged as a suitor for Toronto's OG Anunoby. This is from Shams, that being the Golden State Warriors.
So Jonathan Kuminga is on the table then?
I'm not going to lie to you. A friend of the program, Andy Liu, did message me like about 12:30 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, okay.
And he was like, I don't know, man. All the offers are on the table now for OG. So I don't know. I mean, like, listen, man. I know Andy has sources and stuff like that. I know we always joke about him on the program and stuff like that. But
no,
I think he tipped us up on this one. And yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting. I mean,
but what from Golden State in terms of a package would interest you? Right?
It would probably have to center around Kuminga.
But does that make sense?
Future picks.
Does that make sense if you pair it up with what they've done with bringing Jakob Poeltl in, right? Like, I think unless it's a situation where now I'm like, unless it's a situation where OG like actually like has demanded out, and this is a situation that needs to be
that's not moving you
taken care of. Like, are you if you're trying to win now moving forward, and you've got OG under contract through next season, can you just punt that decision down the line? At least explore in the summer or see if the situation can change. Because if you're trying to win now, I actually don't see the point of trading OG for, say, a Jonathan Kuminga and like draft picks and stuff.
Yeah.
Because then aren't you splitting the difference? Because like Jakob is a move to win now, right?
Okay.
And then what's the point of taking a step forward and then taking a step back?
So you're basically saying that this is not.
No,
like
I'm not.
You don't see a deal happening.
No,
with the
like I wouldn't do it. Is what I would say.
Fair.
Like
fair. Okay.
Is that something that would interest you? Like a package around Kuminga? You get some of these younger players back.
I like Kuminga. Yeah. I mean, his upside is slightly higher than OG, I suppose. I think you trade for Kuminga with the hope that he could become an OG one day. No,
yeah, I mean, but that's the thing, right?
That's most of the stuff that we're really talking about.
Yeah. I just think the Poeltl trade kind of changes the perception of how you look at the front office might be looking at this.
But like I don't think adding Jakob Poeltl was like you're all in now on the Raptors. They've just it's never just like a fully commit to like we are winning or we are tanking. It's more just like we have now solved a problem that we had on the roster.
We're able to bring in an asset to the roster, add and solve the problem. No, I get it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like, how thrilled would you be if the moves were Jakob and then, they get some draft capital back and younger assets for OG?
Yeah, I mean,
right.
It depends. I think it really depends on how high you are on Kuminga. I feel like the Raptors, I mean, look, first off, he's definitely an elite athlete. Like you were talking about, even within NBA athletes, I think he's in the top 5 percentile, like the 95th percentile in terms of athleticism.
Yeah.
Skill-wise, I think we probably saw the best of it against the Raptors when he nailed 4 threes. Remember when the Warriors beat us by, whatever points?
Yeah, which time? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, he is an exciting prospect. He is a far cry right now from OG. That's why if the Warriors were to make a move like this, like that's why they're doing it.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to capitalize on the now with Steph. But I mean,
man, OG on the Warriors though.
I mean, I suppose it gives you other picks, and then maybe you can make some other moves. It balances out your roster, your cap sheet at least a little bit as well.
What about Memphis? What about Memphis? Because like Memphis hasn't made a move yet, and they've been.
Well, I mean, they got Luke Kennard.
Oh yeah, I guess that's okay.
So that's the thing. Like I'm looking at a lot of these teams that have been linked to the Raptors.
They have made moves here.
New Orleans, Memphis, the Clippers, the Lakers.
Phoenix obviously has made their big move.
Like a lot of these teams have made subsequent moves, right? And if you are looking to make that big move with Toronto, um, you know, you would probably want to hold on and prioritize that first. Not to say that something can't happen in the next like 30 minutes here or so, but I'm gonna try to risk it and take a quick break right here.
Mm.
You've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network, and yeah, when we return, more trade deadline live coverage. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Continue to be joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong and producer Jared Manatad. I'm your host, William Liu. Anything happened during the 5-minute break? This is what the deadline does to us, man. You can't take a 5-minute break and feel completely okay with it.
You know what? I always forget for NBA trade deadline, there's all these rumors that circulate, and I know we talk about it like almost every day with the Raptors being at the center of it this season, and then all the action just happens in the last 2 hours, basically.
Yeah.
And this, like, the trades are just flowing in.
Mm-hmm.
I know we talked a lot about the Western Conference there in the last segment. Wanted to shift the focus a little bit to the East as well. Take a look at some of the moves that have been made. I don't think there's been any huge moves. I think up top, you know, I guess the biggest one that's coming out for so far is the Bucks finally getting their guy Jay Crowder in a trade.
Proud of them.
So the Brooklyn Nets acquired Jay Crowder as part of the KD deal yesterday, and then they were able to flip him for 5 second-round picks.
Yeah. That's a new one. I wonder if now that opens the door to 6 second-round picks in the future. How many second-round picks will eventually equal 1 first-round pick?
Yeah, and maybe we can ask Blake Murphy later too. How many second rounders are you allowed to trade? This is like 7 years out.
I mean, I think no. It's not their own.
Yeah.
They're
There's
not
like an
their own,
accumulation.
right?
Right?
There's some other ones that you add in.
But how many second round? Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
Our boy Serge Ibaka is heading to the Pacers.
Yeah, that's a tough
Raptors
one.
fans.
You think he's going to get Tyrese Halliburton into an episode of How Hungry Are You before he leaves?
Do you think Serge left because there was that one episode of How Hungry Are You with Drew Holiday where they FaceTime Giannis?
Yeah.
And Giannis famously called him a role player.
He said, "You're a role player. You should set screens and rebound the ball." Which is, by the way, what the Raptors got in Jakob Poeltl, by the way. So
yeah, shouts to Serge though, man. It's we're still tracking our 2019 championship Raptors.
Hey, it's looking down bad for them right now because Kyle Lowry seems to be on the outs.
Yeah, I believe he's
Miami.
just like been sent home this week, like just granted an absence from the team.
What's that mean?
Yeah, so he's just away from the team at the moment.
Okay, so Kyle's down bad.
Yeah.
Serge is, wow, you can't be more down bad than getting traded to Indiana in February right now.
Yeah,
with no prospects of a long-term contract.
Shouts to Serge.
Or minutes or playoffs.
Yeah.
What else is happening? Danny Green got moved to the Houston Rockets.
Danny Green might get bought out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Hopefully he gets bought out.
We don't need Danny Green to be the new Eric Gordon.
No, please do not hold Danny Green hostage, please.
I need a cam on Eric Gordon when he lands in LA. You know how happy he is, man.
Oh my God!
He's finally out, man.
The sun's gonna be shining all.
He's finally
that circumference of his head right there.
Oh,
and he's gonna really enjoy it. But no, seriously though, like our 2019 Raptors are down bad, and then the Clippers. I mean, I'm not even sure. Like, what did the Clippers really do? Like, to me, it doesn't even make sense to me that they added Bones Highland and Eric Gordon. Like, I thought what they needed with their group was more steady point guard play, someone who can get people into their spots. Right.
Because Bones clearly a score first player.
So is Eric Gordon.
Yeah, Eric Gordon as well. Yeah.
Is that what they needed more of? They're gonna have. I don't know. Their shooting guard options right now are very funny to me because it's also Norm is another player who fits into that category as well. So I'm a little bit confused about what the Clippers are specifically doing at this deadline. Not to say that those aren't talent upgrades; those are talent upgrades. But yeah, I'm confused. But in any case, yeah, 2019 was a long time ago. I think we keep getting this reminder over and over again.
Yeah.
And right now, the Raptors are actually moving back to 2018 by getting Jakob Poeltl. We'll see what happens in the next 20 minutes or so, or if a couple more trades trickle in past the deadline. Because if you're a true veteran of this game, you understand that even after the 3 p.m. deadline happens, you still might see some trades that really come back. And get accomplished. I remember the Raptors traded for PJ Tucker, I think 15 minutes after the deadline.
Right.
It was announced. So that was back in 2017. But so far, just Jakob Poeltl. And, you can tell we're all thrilled about it.
Yeah, and Gary Trent Jr. still slated to do a promo appearance at 3:30. Is that correct? Is that the latest?
Gonna have some breaking news here, boys.
Oh.
My boy Plum Sauce, Mason Plumlee, is getting traded to the Clippers.
Okay. Clippers are Clippers are loading up.
Wow.
Nice little double guy.
Yeah, you would know. We actually need the Mason Plumlee analysis.
Going, please, Mason.
That's your favorite player, man.
No,
I've never seen anyone cheer for Mason Plumlee, but okay, all right. Again, I'm confused what the Clippers are doing. I suppose they have somebody to replace what Isaiah Hartenstein did for them last season, in terms of as a guy who can play 5, be physical, and also make some extra passes.
In return, the Clippers are sending Reggie Jackson to Charlotte.
That's what Charlotte needed, another shoot first guard.
So what point guards do they have now? I mean, John Wall's gone.
Yeah.
Reggie Jackson is gone.
Maybe they're empowering Terrence Mann.
Man,
Or maybe they're making look. There's still 20 minutes.
There's still,
Maybe they
yeah.
get
No,
one of these
it's-
point guards, or maybe they get one of the point guards on the buyout market if that's the case.
yeah.
Like for example, like Westbrook's probably gonna be bought out. I mean, honestly, it
Yeah,
would not.
so-
It would not go well. I think Russell Westbrook has a history with Utah,
Yes.
so they should do the right thing and let him get into a different situation.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna be putting on a Utah uniform. You mentioned Miami as an interesting.
That'd be
destination
interesting.
for
Yeah, because I think you just see Miami as like one of those situations where guys get bought out and they're former stars and they go there. It's just kind of how it goes. Clearly, they can use more help at point guard because they're very dissatisfied with Kyle. And I don't know if Westbrook's an upgrade from Kyle. Is Kyle's down so bad that Westbrook is an upgrade over him? I don't think so. But
No, but I think the other thing too is like for all the flaws, and I think we all know that Westbrook's been picked on for all of that. Like he was a solid bench contributor. Like even if you take in all the his shooting percentage, and sometimes when you watch him play, the eye test is kind of tough because you'll see certain plays where he's a bit out of control. But he can still contribute to an NBA team, just not here in Toronto. Yeah, no, I
we're
think
good, man. We got Jakob Poeltl. We're good.
Yeah,
set, baby.
the Philadelphia 76ers, unfortunately, this is not Furkan Korkmaz news. His trade request is still on the table.
Damn.
I believe.
Do you think
We've
Daryl
got
Morey
about
even
19.
opened that email, man? I don't think he's opening that email, man.
Matisse Thybulle finally has been shipped out. He got sent early in the day to Portland.
Matisse.
Yeah, and this was a 3-way deal, and the Sixers are getting Jalen McDaniels back.
Yep.
So that's a move. Yeah, no team in the East has really made. I mean, all the fireworks has been in the West.
Yeah.
You haven't
and rightfully
seen-
so. And maybe there's still more time for it because with 18 minutes left on the clock, there are still a couple of pieces that could potentially be moved. Again, I still think that contenders in the Western Conference right now really need to look hard at getting some more help on the wing to defend because one Mr. Kevin Durant has now moved over to your side.
Yeah, we
And
should.
that's not to say that anybody is a KD stopper, but you definitely want somebody who can at least, guard him at a decent passable rate.
Yeah, this is the pitch that's happening.
Am I
on
pitching
Bobby's,
this?
Bobby's second phone.
Should we
right
call
now.
Andy Liu again? Remember when because right now there's reports of the Raptors are talking to the Warriors, right, about OG, right? And we literally had this kind of like mock scenario happen on the show
Yeah,
last Friday
great
when
episode.
we had Andy on the program.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit Kevin Durant trade and then never talk about KD again.
Well, I mean, clearly it's done, man. It's,
On this
it's over,
program.
man. Yeah.
I did say yesterday that the Nets should go in a separate direction, but
I gotta say, I was completely wrong on that one. I really thought that they were just going to continue to try to do whatever.
But
to
all
salvage.
signs did point to them trying to just make like this one last dash, and I'm actually glad they pivoted in this direction because the writing was on the wall, right? Like if you have to just start accumulating assets at some point for the future.
But these assets would have been on the table even if they waited for
so do you
past
think
this deadline. It's not like Phoenix would have said no to KD for Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and 4 picks.
Yeah, but I think ultimately too, Brooklyn had all these conversations. They're trying to get all the players from the Raptors and stuff. Like I think there's just no deal on the table because like Woj was actually reporting that before the Suns and the Nets completed this deal, I guess like John Collins was another player that was in conversation. Nets are clearly scouring, but like, do you think they would have gotten a better package this summer versus this? Just in terms of like a return for KD, like I feel like given the situation that they're in, this is a pretty good return for them.
Sure. I mean, any return for KD would have been.
But
would have been
4
pretty
unprotected
good.
firsts,
Yeah.
right? 2023, 25, 27, 29.
Yep.
And
that's not just long enough to the point where KD's probably going to age out or no longer be in Phoenix.
Mikal Bridges, which Jake Fisher has reported that the Nets have no interest in moving today because there was some talks.
He's a good player.
Yeah, that the Rockets were interested at one point. But Bridges, Cam Johnson, and obviously they've moved Jay Crowder now. Like, I feel like if you compared it to the whatever offers that might have been on the table this summer, I feel like they did pretty well given the situation.
Well, I mean, it's interesting now because when you think back on it, with the Phoenix Suns, right, and the Brooklyn Nets, when the Nets and the Mavericks first made the Kyrie deal on the weekend, there was all that talk on Monday of like, oh, the Nets maybe want to expand it to Toronto and get involved. And you heard some of those names, which didn't make sense when it was like, okay, they're interested in like Pascal Siakam. I'm like, how are you going to make a deal happen with Pascal Siakam? Do you think that in that Monday call when they were trying to expand it, do you think they were trying to talk KD?
Of course.
Okay, so then
I feel like you have to.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure Masai definitely had to. Masai
Yeah.
definitely had to say like, "Hey, oh, you guys are gonna make more moves? Like, okay, give me
Yeah.
is KD back on the table?"
But I'm guessing the conversation is probably the same. Probably asked for Scotty in that scenario
Yeah,
to start.
I don't know, but you never heard Scotty's name in those dimensions. You heard OG. You heard that they're interested in Fred. You heard that they're interested in Pascal. And I'm like, wow, you're asking for a lot. I mean, are you gonna give us Kevin Durant back?
Yeah.
And ultimately, obviously, KD moves on. But yeah, that was a fun saga, I suppose. Did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the KD talk that we had for at least 10 episodes on this podcast?
Yeah,
Which
you
goes
know,
daily?
It was just tough because, I know we were pining for Giannis for a little bit, especially when the Raptors, I guess, maneuvered their salary cap room to fit exactly Giannis's max deal, which got me very excited. And that didn't happen. He signed his extension. And, it was fun. It was fun pining for KD for a little bit this summer.
Yeah.
Really tried to will it into existence. It didn't happen. And I guess now we
have Jakob
now
Poeltl.
we look forward
on,
to
man.
now
Got
we
another
look,
7-footer on the roster.
Bring back Joe Wieskamp, get some
What's going on,
shooting.
man? Actually, honestly, I really would not mind if the Raptors went out and got Joe Wieskamp again.
That's my win now move suggestion.
Because look, we'll definitely talk more Jakob Poeltl after the deadline is over when we know exactly where everyone is.
The Atlanta Hawks, by the way, are per Chris Haynes is keeping John Collins.
Wow.
So he has survived another trade deadline.
No, he's the new Eric Gordon, man.
He really is.
He's the new Eric Gordon. They're gonna. He's gonna be in Atlanta for another 5
Still
years.
no news on freaking Korkmaz. Yeah.
Wow.
So, shouts to the new Suns owner Matt Ishbia. So again, from Woj reporting just the behind the scenes, he got on the phone with Joe Tsai last night and just got it done. So
yeah. Well,
shouts to Joe
why
Tsai.
do GMs and like these presidents even exist
Yeah.
to a certain degree when these two billionaires are just gonna call each other up and say, yeah. You want to do
But
it?
first
I'm
day
like, okay.
getting Katie in the door.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I guess Joe Tsai is just gonna have to enjoy this is what the Nets' identity just should be. Just this plucky team coached by Jacques Vaughn. They can return to their normal now.
Well, I mean,
after having these two superstars just come through.
No, they need to get Rondae back from Korea.
Oh yeah.
We talked about Rondae in Korea yesterday.
Where he's playing Bejeweled right now. By the way, Brian Windhorst also today dropped a little nugget to just say that keep an eye on Kyrie potentially to Phoenix this summer.
Oh man,
because he said there was a lot of interest.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, right? They
if you're KD, do you really want to go through the Kyrie experiment again?
Clearly, they do. I think clearly they do. And I think that, I mean, that's very interesting because obviously Chris Paul has that like weirdly structured contract,
right,
where it's only partially guaranteed. You can make some moves happen in that time. And of course, Dallas is not in a position having already given up assets to get KD or Kyrie in the door in the first place. Worst case scenario, Kyrie really doesn't work out and they need to move on from Kyrie as soon as this offseason. That does potentially make sense. Meanwhile, Kyrie, KD, Devin Booker, and I guess DeAndre Ayton around to get rebounds.
Yeah.
That
Lee.
That sounds great.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter who the rest
Ishwi,
of the team is, man.
Campaign. Wow, these are all former Raptors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bismack Biyombo.
Yeah, I guess that is a big question if you think about Phoenix in the West. Is Chris Paul kind of taking a step back this season?
I mean, they're already essentially trying to trade him once.
Yeah. But
for Kyrie.
Damn. No, shout out to Phoenix, man. Vibes were bad. Lost by 50 last year in Game 7.
Yeah.
Had to make a big move. Got rid of their owner, and now they got KD. Damn.
Yeah. Well, you also tweeted how quickly the league moves because there's a real chance that the Suns play the Dallas Mavericks at some point in the playoffs, and it'll be KD versus Kyrie.
Yeah, this would be wild, man. I want KD's playoff run to be LeBron, Kyrie, and then Steph. Or in some order. I think that would be
I like this.
That would be amazing.
And I like that the East is a little bit more open again. Although, I mean, it wasn't like the Raptors are going to shoot up there. Although they did get Jakob Poeltl. Have you heard this? I've mentioned this 25 times on the show now.
Yes.
I don't know if that's going to necessarily move it up
you even think about the rest of this Raptors season now, right? Because I think for the last month or month and a half, we've been looking at them through like the lens of just like lottery odds or where they can end up, right, for the draft. So, I mean, just looking at the Poeltl move, alone, like, do you feel like now the rest of the season, the goal is to win as many games as possible, get into the play-in, try to have that outside shot at the top 6?
That always seemed to be the direction that the Raptors intended to go. And I always really doubted like Masai's appetite for a long-term rebuild. I definitely didn't think that was there at all. Potentially just based on how bad this season was and where they were in the standings. And again, like I mentioned yesterday, the Raptors, I think yesterday before the games last night, They were 2.5 games from the 5th best record in the lottery, or the 5th best odds, and also 2.5 games back of 8th place in the Eastern Conference.
So
right, so
they're
they need to
in
pick
the
a
middle.
direction.
Yeah.
The direction that the Raptors ultimately wanted to go in is to sort of continue building on this group. And look, listen, I think from the front office perspective, they probably think that, look, there's a lot of talent here on the team. And that even though they're underperforming right now, that they can fix some of those things internally, right? Take care of some of the players, maybe redistribute the roster a slight bit, definitely bring in a 7-footer, which was missing. And, you'll see if that can, change their fortunes and get them to a better result. It's not like we weren't optimistic on the Raptors heading into this year. Of course, we also have like 50 plus games of evidence where the Raptors just look kind of really sorry in a lot of these games. But still, there is still that potential and that talent. And I think that that's what they're showing right now, is that they want to reinvest in this group. And you know what? If it doesn't work out ultimately, you could still make decisions on them after this. You could still sign them to their contracts. And, again, if it really doesn't work out again, you can still make moves with the players under contract. These guys are all young. They're all fairly healthy. You can make that decision. Of course, I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. I don't have a crystal ball. This is what the front office is really getting paid for, is to make sure that there's a future here in Toronto and that they can continue building on it. And this is the choice that they made. They want to continue reinforcing this group. So at least we have a sense of direction in terms of their intention with this group.
Yeah.
We have another trade.
Okay.
This is Andy Liu's team, right?
This might be an update. The Warriors are trading for Gary Payton II for 5 second-round picks, and the Warriors are routing Kevin Knox to the Blazers via the multi-team deal with the Pistons.
How many second-round picks are there in the league? How's every
It's a
team
lot.
choosing 5 second-round picks, man?
Also, a lot of reunions just happening, man. Like Gary Payton's going back.
Right.
Golden State, Dwayne Dedman's going back to San Antonio.
Is he?
Yeah, well, I think he's getting bought out.
Oh,
though.
okay, all right.
But that's a former Spur.
Right.
All right, like that move.
That's
There's
interesting, yeah.
there's your KD stopper.
Oh, man. No, I mean, I'm happy.
How about getting the band back together, man? Where's Otto Porter, man?
How
Nine
much did-
toes
how
deep.
much did
Shouts to Otto.
Wow, man. Shouts to Otto, man. I was going to say, top 55 protected pick.
Yeah.
I've said it already,
Well,
man. We can make that happen.
No, I think everybody knows the Warriors have been up and down. Steph's out for the next month, but when they've been healthy and they've had their starting lineup, they're still one of the top teams. Even though they've been, I still don't understand why they struggle so much on the road. And adding Gary Payton, bring the band back together.
Right.
I mean, I just think the Warriors need to get, and I don't know if they can. They need to get into at least the top 6, or I don't even know if at this point they can get into the top 4 because they're 9th right now. Because it's hard to make that playoff run from the play-in, or just not having home court advantage throughout.
Yeah.
I don't care about all those records about how those guys have never lost really when they've been fully healthy in the playoffs and stuff. But I mean, that's a good move for the Warriors.
Oh, yeah, of course. Of course.
And
It makes
again,
perfect sense. Also,
again,
where are these
the
second-round
poop- yeah,
picks
the-
coming from, man?
this is really the new poo-poo playa.
I think this is an update to the James Wiseman to the Pistons for Sadiq Bey. And
Okay.
I think it's included in that deal. But it is all over the place pretty much right now. There's a lot of tweets coming through with that one deal. But yeah, there's a lot of second-round picks. With a few minutes left until the trade deadline, there have been reports about Bobby Marks and Adrian Wojnarowski saying that the Raptors might stand pat, even though Shams is reporting that the Warriors are suitors for OG Anunoby. Would you be surprised if the Raptors stand pat with the Jakob Poeltl deal at the deadline?
If that was the ultimate outcome of this trade deadline after all the discussions that we had, I mean,
would you just be personally upset?
Personally,
Yeah.
I'd be pretty upset.
I mean, the
because
content has been put out there into the
Oh
ether
my
and it has been
goodness,
consumed. Yeah.
But no, but I just feel like obviously the trade deadline noise is always louder than what the specific thing that's going to happen is, right? In fact, we've heard very little about how the Brooklyn Nets were going to completely turn it around and move all their pieces. And in the span of 3 days, KD and Kyrie are out the door and they have an entirely new team. But at the same time, you did hear a ton of noise about the Toronto Raptors, and what changed specifically? Was it the 4-3 road trip that changed it for them? Was the negotiation for Jakob Poeltl, did it come down to a point where they were more willing to go in that direction and they picked it? Was it just other teams sort of of course you have all these discussions, but until you really lay the cards out on the table, you don't really know what you have. Is it sort of just some of these offers for Gary or OG or Fred, they weren't really there. But it would leave me with a lot of questions because to me, it's if the Raptors do stand pat in the next 5-6 minutes here, okay, so are you then re-signing Fred in the offseason?
Mhm.
And how much for how much, right? And are you re-signing Gary in the offseason and for how much? How much is it going to take to, obviously you're going to re-sign Jakob Poeltl. You don't make this kind of trade unless you actually do re-sign him. The fact that they don't re-sign him be a huge colossal failure, right? And of course that they will. How much of that is going to be on your team, going forward? And then of course, then you can't really give more money to OG because then you'd be in the tax. Can't really give more money to Pascal because you'd be in the tax. Then Precious is up for an extension. Then, Scotty Barnes down the line is also up for an extension. So I would have a lot of questions, right? There's a reason why there were so many trade rumors about the Toronto Raptors. It wasn't just about the fact that, they've been struggling. It wasn't just about the fact that they have certain players who were underperforming. I think for their perspective, it just made sense on paper. Right now at the current moment, with again 5 minutes left to go here, you have 3 guys heading into free agency, unrestricted free agency at the same time.
Yeah, no. To be honest, I was expecting either Fred or Gary to be moved today, just based on the money situation.
Gary, I mean, come on, man.
Oh, he's on his way.
He's supposed to be into the KFC
on
court
his way
soon.
to the KF court. Hey, basketball fans, see you there.
Yeah.
3:30, I believe. He'll be there. But we do have a reporter at the KFC court, by the way. Faisal Kamisa will be there. So if there's any quotes from Gary, he has promised that he'll send it through.
Oh, okay.
It's a better source than my sourcing on Bobby Webster having a presser this Tuesday.
That was a break. But somebody in the front office from the Raptors side will be there to answer questions.
Yeah, as I said,
later today.
No, I think to your point though, yes, like I would be very surprised if this was the only move. And I think, like you mentioned, the clock is ticking on these decisions in terms of the free agents this summer, and then the decision on Pascal and OG. You essentially giving yourself like this 2-year window then to kind of figure this stuff out. And it's like, yeah, the money just doesn't add up to me. Like when you think about having to pay all of these guys. I mean, you going into the luxury tax and all of this for this core group?
No. First off, the answer is definitively no.
Right.
The Raptors have gone into the luxury tax, I believe, once in their history, and it was for the championship.
Right. So,
and to be honest, it's not just like, oh, they're being cheap about it. This team is not worth going into the tax for.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm with you.
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean,
we'll see here.
2 minutes to go.
Anything else, Jared? Anything breaking or no?
No, there's actually nothing happening. Everyone's pretty much waiting for this last domino to fall if the reports are true, if the Warriors and Raptors could make a deal for OG and Anunoby. Obviously, we reported earlier today that Chance was thinking or saying that the Warriors are suitors for an OG and Anunoby trade, and we saw so many dominoes fall that could happen. So I know there's a few minutes left in the trade deadline. A lot can happen within, not even just at 3:00 p.m., but even just a few minutes afterwards.
Right. No, we're starting to see some of the deals start to wrap up, though. You're starting to see the reports of like you
guys
mentioned.
Are staying put.
Yeah, the report, John Collins is staying put. Report, Christian Wood is indeed staying put in Dallas. I'm like, I wasn't worried about this, man. Give me real news. Don't just tweet the something out there.
Did you also see that Damian Lillard is committed to Portland?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I was not surprised to see that it was Chris Haynes who put it out, man.
Yeah. Shouts to that.
They got a good connection over there. No, but seriously though, wow, this is this a little underwhelming? This is a little underwhelming. I feel underwhelmed. Not from the Raptors perspective. I think the trade deadline overall definitely delivered. The Lakers made their moves. Russell Westbrook, got flipped.
This has been a splashy trade deadline, man. Like you just even need to talk about the KD trade.
Yeah,
like it's been wild. But is there a clock ticking right now? Sound effect?
Oh,
shouts to Brendan.
I definitely don't already feel like tense enough with the deadline itself. Thanks, Derek. We're gonna feel even worse.
But I think this was always one of the scenarios, right? Like I think
was one of the scenarios we just get Jakob Poeltl and we talked about it for 2 hours.
I mean, this is coming from two guys who did Thaddeus Young trade analysis for 2 hours.
Oh man,
last season,
I'm not gonna lie.
Every season we just break down one Spurs trade.
So now there's a third report. We had Woj reported, we had Bobby Marks reported. Now we have Zach Lowe saying on TV that he's thinking that the Raptors are going to be staying put at the deadline.
There's 5 seconds until the deadline. I'm thinking the same at this point, man.
Oh, man.
Oh, my Lord. Oh, my God. Well.
It's over, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, all right.
Man.
Okay, so, look, we will be on the lookout for more potential trades, and we will hold on just a little bit here just to see anything kind of trickle through here, but at the moment, it seems like the Raptors just got Jakob Poeltl
Yeah, grade this trade deadline, man.
from the Toronto Raptors perspective.
Yeah, at this moment. This guy's like, why did I spend 2 months
No, we literally
talking about every
my
player in the
goodness.
league?
Oh my goodness.
So many
No.
scenarios. No, but this was always a scenario that was going to
Okay,
happen.
look.
Did people not warn you that, like we know we know this front office,
Okay, look,
They gotta
objectively,
listen.
objectively, the Raptors did improve from where they were like prior to the deadline.
Yes. But
So from that perspective, like of course there should be optimism if you like the Raptors.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I think a lot of people were pretty out on this this specific core. They're ready to look for a different
Of course.
combination of players,
Yeah.
and that didn't happen for them. And I can understand why they're upset.
No, trust
For
me.
me, I'm just upset because we spent so much time talking about this.
Yeah.
And Jakob Poeltl could be a 10-minute conversation. It didn't need to be this big of a thing. But
No, it's all good,
you know.
man. I just wanted more content. I was predicting a Kelly Oubre for a second rounder, but that's we still have time for that. But yeah, no, I guess my big question would be if this is the situation and there's no more deals coming through. Like, I guess the biggest thing is like, the future with OG. Like, all the talk about him being unhappy,
how's he
wanting
gonna walk that one back? By the
No,
way, he's
but-
just gonna be like, I didn't say I wanted to be traded.
you know what
They're
I
like,
mean?
do you want a bigger role? And he's like, everyone wants a bigger role.
Because what is that? Is that situation just going to carry over into the summer now?
Apparently.
And that's something that they're going to explore.
Yep.
Can they find a way for him to just, move forward, convince him and Rich Paul that it's okay, Elite 3 and D guys get max deals too, man.
Okay, let's hear your grade. Let's hear your grade.
My grade?
Yeah,
Um,
on the Raptors trade
team
deadline so
wise,
far.
I'll give him a C. Yeah. That's just content wise, I would give him a D minus.
Oh, content wise, this is an F, man. You can't,
Content-wise.
I can't believe that we spent. Oh my god, I'm sick. I'm not sick because the Raptors didn't like.
Will in general just doesn't, trade rumor talk just isn't like on the top 3 things of his,
No, I just mean
favorite.
like
He's a
if we
hooper.
talk about it for this long,
Yeah.
I wanted something more to happen,
Of course.
and I think from
course,
that
I've been-
perspective, it just didn't happen. And now I have a lot
Yeah.
of questions.
Yeah.
And we will be asking those questions to the front office when they are finally made available to media later today. I'm sure the introduction for Jakob Poeltl can probably take place today, considering the fact that he was literally in Toronto. And what would you say your sources were telling you? Jakob Poeltl after the game?
No more sourcing.
No
for
more
me,
sourcing.
by the
All
way.
right. Well,
just
so I don't think Jakob left the city. Let's
yeah,
just say
don't think
that.
he left the city.
So, I'm sure we could just do the introductory press conference. Or maybe the front office doesn't have to wait
So
too
what's
long.
the what's the shift now
afterwards,
for the
but-
for the rest of the season? We're going for that
Okay.
top 6.
So the shift
What's
is
the energy?
who is our starting 5 going to be?
Okay.
Because of the fact that we now have 6 guys who are contending for starting spots, maybe even 7 with Precious involved. But I think Precious is definitely behind Jakob Poeltl in that sense. So that's a big question. That's the first one for me. Number 2 is going to be, what positions are Scotty and Precious going to play long term? Because now you have a long term center in the middle, so they're clearly not going to be playing as much center. They can play their spot minutes, but they're not going to continuously play there, which means they're going to have to find ways to make that happen on the wing. I think I'm going to be thinking about, okay, so is Gary and Fred, are they going to be going into free agency with the intent of coming back to the Raptors, or is it going to be a sign and trade situation? Because you definitely can't let these guys leave the team without any actual compensation, which now that the trade deadline has passed, that window has closed. So you definitely need to then now secure them either to reasonable deals or sign and trade them in the offseason. Then it's the OG Anunoby conundrum of like, okay, so, can that, can he be happy with that group and all that kind of stuff? Is what's all that? What's happening with that? And then I think on top of it, you just really have to have a newer sort of way of playing, because now all of a sudden you do have that true 7-footer in the middle, right? So does that change the way the Raptors play defense? What that really looks like overall. And yeah, I mean, there'll be plenty of basketball topics to talk about actually after the trade deadline. But for right now, the Raptors really just did one deal, and
You seem so disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm just disappointed because we talked about it. For
What's
like
up, JR?
2
We got some
months.
news?
Yeah, Shams has reported that he hasn't heard any moves for the Raptors.
You just throwing us
Yeah,
nothing burgers.
you didn't have to tell us that, man.
Grange, which we'll have him in a few minutes, says that barring any last minute deals, he's sensing that the Raptors are going to be standing pat and leaving it at acquiring Poeltl.
All right. Well, by the way, we're going to be hearing Herbie Kuhn announce Jakob Poeltl over and over again in Scotiabank Arena again. And
That's a winner of this deal. Yeah. That's
It
definitely.
actually is. Actually, oh, shouts to Herbie. But anyway, we're gonna take a quick break right here. I've been your host William Lou, and you've been listening to the Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. On the other side of this break, we are gonna call up Michael Grange and get a sense of what he's heard about the team so far, and sort of like answer some of those questions we just presented. Because right now, a lot of confusion on the Raptors front. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Liu. Continue to be joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong, and also producer and I guess also co-host right now, JR Manatad.
Budding star.
Yeah? What would you give? We graded the Raptors trade deadline, which was just a question mark. I don't know if you ever submitted an assignment to your teacher and they just put a question mark. They're like, you didn't answer any of the questions here?
I'd give JR a 4, man.
Yeah?
On the annual review.
All right. That's how we do it here at OMP.
You don't get to ask questions, JR.
Okay.
Yeah, right,
You're
JR.
just here to deliver.
No, you're only here to deliver Shams and Woj updates.
No, shout out to JR Manatad,
Um,
Derek Brandeo, Jennifer Rolnick.
That's right.
Everybody helping.
Our
us
team
out.
here. And of course, we're joined by another Sportsnet colleague, Michael Grange, who is, I believe, down at the Raptors practice facility right now.
You down bad.
Grange, what's going on, man? What's the reaction in the room? Since we couldn't be there.
A lot of, really? Is that all? Is that it? I mean, it kind of felt like that. You know, there just was no real hints of anything significant going on after, basically since 1 a.m. And I'm sure the reaction here is no different than reaction in your little space there, and just seems like a really strange standalone move. I mean, I think it's defensible in the sense of the goal is to get better with each transaction, and trading Jakob Poeltl for Kem Birch and a future first, like you have more good players, a better player on your roster than you did yesterday. But how this fits in bigger picture, and is it worth the potential draft, the pick you gave up with the protections on it? I mean, I don't know. That's a tough one.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to what Masai says, because it's just also been announced that Masai will speak at 4 p.m. So I'm curious to hear, some of the questions to Masai about this very thing, because I think there are a lot of questions left unanswered, Grange, because for me, it's like, okay, does this mean Fred is coming back, or is he going? And if he goes, then, okay, can you work out a sign and trade? Because that's not a lot of great value being accumulated there. Same thing with Gary. And then, of course, like the whole OG question. And then, of course, on top of that, how is Jakobs fitting with this group? Maybe we'll address those in order. But right now, I mean, what's your sense? Is Fred and Gary coming back? Like,
I would think so. I mean,
okay.
To me, if you make the move to acquire Jakob, and at the same time, that Fred and Gary are likely free agents. And by the way, Jakob's a free agent as well. Mm-hmm. I know we've talked about this before, is you have to be absolutely certain that you can bring back Gary and Fred, or you have a means to create value for them, from them in the offseason through a sign and trade, which is like, you can't depend on that. Like that's, they're pretty rare transactions that actually really work out. So to me, it signals that they're doubling down on this group. They're doubling down on this style of play. If you, as a result of this, or somehow sideways of this, don't bring back both Gary and Fred, and don't generate some good returns on really good players, like really good players who start for you that have value, that's a real screw up. Like that's a big mistake. So I think, and look, that's nothing Bobby and Masai and everyone else wouldn't know. Like, I mean, I don't think this is something that slipped their mind. I think that they have somehow calculated that, we can bring these guys back. There's probably a number. We can do all three. We might have to make another roster move. Maybe it's, moving off a little bit more money. But to me, when you bring back, when you make the move for Jakob Poeltl and trade future assets to make it happen, I think you're investing in the group as it is. And it's a big investment because, JD Bunkus summed it up pretty well in a tweet just a few minutes ago. But in theory, Jakob Poeltl should make your team better this year. So your draft position this year is getting worse. Like you're going to be, trying for the play-in, maybe make a run at a playoff spot. You've put your pick next year. You're kind of committed to keeping that it's sort of being a playoff team again until that pick conveys. And you're doing it all with a team that right now is 4 games under 500 and still has gaps, as we would all know.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because I do feel like if you were to move in this buying direction, wouldn't you not have added a little bit more help, especially off the bench, especially as a shooter off the bench? I mean, like, I think it makes complete sense to add a center to this group. I think they've been kind of crying out for one for a while. But it does kind of feel like even though they moved in this direction, they probably could have continued to move in this direction. But listen, ultimately, I guess we don't know all the offers that were made, and perhaps maybe they just didn't get good offers for OG and Gary and Fred. Is that possible, Grange?
I mean, that cuts both ways, though, right? Because I would say you can only conclude that the offers they got for any of their players weren't enough for them to part with them. Otherwise, I presume, they would, right? But then when you look at what some of the prices were on some of the players that did move, like you mentioned, this is a team that needs shooting. Well, Luke Kennard, what did he move for? 2 second-round picks? They can kind of go down through the list. Like there's some, like if you were willing to put any number of second-round picks up to 5, it seems like.
That was a magic number this year. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you could get some pretty good quality rotation players, certainly players I think who would be in the rotation on this team. So, and yet they didn't do that either. And you could also kind of argue that, I don't know, would Jakob Poeltl an overpay based on all the deals that were out there? Like, how many first-round picks were traded today?
Yeah, well,
for not Kevin Durant.
Yeah, well, that's obviously very different. He's worth every single one of those.
That's my point, though, right?
Yeah. Well,
is like there was a lot of pretty good players traded. There weren't a lot of, the Raptors were one of the very few teams that gave up a first-round pick and a pretty lightly protected one too. And one that can, it's got 3 years to convey, so it's not one of those where you give it up for a year, and then a year later it turns into magic dust. So, I'm not even convinced they paid a good price for Jakob Poeltl. I mean, they did in the sense that it didn't cost them much off their roster, but, so then we can move on to the other issues. But the whole thing, as you can tell, I'm still kind of processing it, but as I process it, there's nothing that jumps out to me that says, wow, I really get this. And most of the time when they've made moves, the years I've been covering them, I kind of go, yeah, I get this. This one makes sense, or I see their logic. And this one, it escapes me a little bit.
Yeah, just interrupting you guys. From multiple sources, from the Clippers side, apparently Raptors wanted Terrence Mann and potentially a first-round pick included for Fred, and that's why no deal was done between those two sides. And Shams just said on a show that Toronto and Chicago felt like the East became more open with KD being traded to Phoenix. So
that's true.
I mean, I guess.
It did, but I mean, the Nets still look like they have a pretty good team.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, on the Clippers side, I'm a little confused by that. Why would the Clippers not do that deal?
I guess they like Trey Mann, would be my guess, right? Like, I mean, they like Trey Mann. They don't want to give up a good first. Like I guess maybe with Eric Gordon. Eric Gordon's a pretty good playmaker, I think, especially if he's, if he doesn't have to. And Bones Highland is a guy who could generate some offense for you. So maybe they just found us.
But those are both shoe first guards. I thought that was the issue with the Clippers roster construction was all their point guards were shoe first guards, and that they weren't necessarily getting the team into their offense, which is obviously heavily half court based. With
are we mad at the Clippers because they wouldn't take Fred? Is that your point?
No, I'm confused on both ends. From the Raptors' perspective, that doesn't sound like that much in return, especially considering the fact, and that's not to say that I don't like Terrence Mann or that I don't value a potential first round pick coming back. But to me, it was like, okay, if you're going to win, if you're going to try to do something with this roster now, which is what you've done with Jakob Poeltl, how does Terrence Mann improve your team as compared to Fred? Especially in the shooting department, especially when you got a guy like Jakob Poeltl who's very good at operating in dribble handoffs or coming out of the post and setting screens for guys. That's a pick and roll player that you're going to now need more guard play to surround him with, and also more shooting to surround him with, to get the maximum value out of that style of player, at least in the offensive side of the floor. Fred seems to fit that more than what Terrence Mann would have. So I'm a little confused as to sort of the direction there. And then, of course, like, there was the last second talks of, okay, Golden State jumping into the OG Anunoby thing. And, it seems a report I've seen on the timeline here, and who knows if this is right or wrong, but it seems like the Raptors were clearly interested in Jonathan Kuminga. I'm confused. These point towards two different directions. Grange, are you also confused?
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I heard that there was a chance at Memphis, and you kind of go down the list of those opportunities, and maybe the draft picks would have made them a little more palatable, but it was hard for both of those teams, especially once Memphis got off Danny Green, to make a deal that made sense with OG Anunoby. And I share your, like, that's the point, is you're not coming out of this trade deadline for all the discussion and conversation that really has been going on since training camp about, because that's been a message from the beginning, is this group needed the opportunity to prove itself, they earned it based on last year. It's a growing group, and, we're going to give it another period. That's why we more or less stood pat and fortified. And yet here we are, game 55. And look, even if you can argue that they've underachieved and it's been a little bit of bad basketball luck, but I think even with good basketball luck, they'd be 3 or 4 games over 500, right? Like, I don't think there's been any evidence this team is prepared to be really good based on who they have. And yet you have invested in it, and so your direction seems to be status quo versus kind of, peeling back and saying, you've got Gary Trent, who's 24, you've got OG Anunoby, who's 25, you've got Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes is 21, and Festus Achua that's 23. Right. You could, like, if they had come out of this and they had moved on from Fred VanVleet and maybe constructed a deal that they were going to revisit in the summer around Pascal Siakam, guys who at that point would be 28, 29 years old, each of them, that would make sense. We go, you know what, like these guys have been great for us. They helped us win a title. They're going to do great things at their next stop, but for good reason. We got great return, and we're kind of taking a step back, and we're going to build around these, the 25 and under crowd. Everyone would understand that, right? Or if maybe they were more aggressive on the buy side, if they kind of, put more pick equity. I'm not saying I would have recommended it, but if they put more pick equity into the market and added and filled more than one hole, right? So if they added more bench depth, more shooting, something, backup point guard, something, in addition to Jakob Kurl, we go, okay, you know what? We've really done a lot of math on this. We really think our talent is way above our record, and there's a few fixes we can make that we think will make us a top 14 in the East, and just watch us. Okay, that's interesting too. I wouldn't buy it, but it's at least a direction.
Right.
I think you're sitting here, and why our conversation is going the way it is because we don't know. There's no discernible, really obvious logic other than, let's try and make the play in this year, which, by the way, is something Dave Ujiri has consistently said, that's not something he's going to go to his way to try and make happen.
Well, theoretically, Grange, they could still tank the rest of the season. They didn't trade this pick.
Yeah, I guess,
They're not going to do it, but yeah.
I guess they could, but and again, that's the other thing. They sold off a bunch of players, everyone but Scotty, and said, no, we're in for Scoot. We'd all nod our heads and go, yeah, we get that too. This is the one direction that I think all of us are kind of going, explain this again?
Yeah.
Because they haven't explained it the first time.
Yeah, I just think is because now there's just so much pressure. They've kind of put themselves in a corner to just have to win next season and having to face all these decisions in the summer, like you guys outlined, right? Like bringing back Fred, Gary, and then Jakob, dealing with the OG situation. And even beyond that, like you mentioned, like they still have to fill some needs on this roster, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of questions that they're punting into the summer, but they've also kind of like, I think one of the things for the Raptors coming in and as an advantage for them coming in the deadline was like, oh, all these available options was open to them. Like some of the ones that you outlined, right, Grange? Like in terms of like maybe going with Scotty's timeline and like retooling a little bit. And now it seems like they've closed off some of those options for themselves and kind of put themselves in a position where they have to, address these issues in the summer. And their option right now for next year is to win.
Yeah, I agree, and have they made that more likely? And when you talk about the free agents, they'll have to figure out numbers for and somehow fit in. You're going to have to revisit the Pascal Siakam extension. You're going to be looking at a Achua extension, and you're all of a sudden you're going to have a year-long. Maybe OG Anunoby gets traded in the summer. A lot of this makes a little bit more sense because there'll be more players who can get in that market. But yeah, a lot has been pushed off for the summer. And I agree with you, Alex. I don't see, how they've kind of made those decisions easier than they are now. And so I'm actually going to be very interested to hear what Messiah has to say. I suspect, he'll somehow make it make sense, but it's going to be a little harder than normal.
Grange, my last question here before we let you go. Could you not have just traded for Jakob Poeltl last offseason? Like last year at this time, you could have potentially traded for Jakob Poeltl. And obviously, this is like with hindsight. You could have done essentially 2 first-round picks. You could have gotten for 2 playoff runs. Actually, right now, you don't even know if there will be a playoff run this summer. But you could have gotten from last year's playoff run. You would have had somebody at least to stand in the middle and be 7-foot against Joel Embiid. And, I don't know. Like, what are we doing?
No,
I'm so confused, Grange.
Well, this time last year, the price was, they really wanted Jakob Poeltl.
Clearly, that's the one thing we've heard over and over again.
Yeah, they were willing to go to 2 picks. The Spurs just didn't seem ready to engage. Maybe they would have even gone higher than that. But it was really just more, my impression was that the Spurs were kind of holding out for a home run offer and the Raptors blocked. But, and it's interesting, and I tweeted something about this this morning. I can't remember, I'm pretty groggy. And it's not really a second guess, but, I think it is worth bringing up that when they made that decision to trade for Thad and, what it was effectively, the Raptors' first-round pick for the Spurs' second-round pick. So it ended up being you're picking 20 instead of 33 instead of 20. And at the time, right, the explanation or the rationale was like moving down 10, 11, 12. It ended up being 13 spots in the first round, in the draft order period, was not that big a deal. That the material difference in, the players that would be available in that draft in the 20s versus the early 30s were comparable. And that's proven a mistake, right? Like, we all know that now. And it is, for sure, it's hindsight to say, wow, you could have had Walker Kessler. But, when you are actively making a decision and saying, you know what, moving down, what ended up being, I think, 13 places in the draft, is not that big a deal because if we can still get a player comparable, that's the logic. And ignoring who particular players are involved, it's been proven to be, that was a mistake, right? Like that was, we all love that. He's a good dude. He's, has brings some other intangibles, but had you maintained that draft position and you decided that Walker Kessler was the right pick, which is your job to do, right? Like that's the whole point of this whole exercise is, making sure you pick the right player. Then a lot of the stuff you would have avoided a ton of it. You'd have a better team this year. You wouldn't be, feeling the need to trade for Jakob Poeltl and putting a 24 pick in the mix, and on and on. And so, these little kind of calculations, each of them carry weight. And for a long time, I think the Raptors would come out ahead on each of those little calculations. We can all cite the examples, and that hasn't necessarily been the case the last little while. And I think that's maybe why going into this and then coming out of it with a kind of a picture that still feels a bit muddled, you're kind of waiting for people are a little bit more skeptical, I think, as to the whole thought process involved.
All right, Grange, look forward to hearing some of these same questions, asked of Masai in a couple of minutes here. And it's going to be a busy day for all of us, but I appreciate you taking the time.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right. we are going to take our final break. Before we go to our final segment, we're going to bring in Blake Murphy, who I'm sure has all the details on Jakob Pertl's improvements in San Antonio, and also ask him some of the same questions. We're all very confused with the Raptors in the trade deadline for the second summer in a row. Do they have any other number in the league other than San Antonio's? I'm just curious.
Still RC Buford?
Yeah, it's R.C. Buford and it's Brian Wright, I think,
Oh,
who I think
okay.
is friends with. No, it was just like we've made a lot of trades with San Antonio.
Yes.
That's all. I mean, so we will answer those tough questions. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you to JR. Low usage player in this segment here, but definitely high value, high efficiency overall. Appreciate you for helping us with trade deadline coverage, and we're gonna go to that final break. So you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, William Liu. Continue to join my producer and co-host, Alex Wong. And for the final segment, and to make some sense of a very, very confusing trade deadline for the Toronto Raptors, is Blake Murphy. Blake, we can't even play your theme song today because we just got to hop right into it. We have limited amount of time. Okay, so first off, your reaction to this overall... Wait, hold on. No way.
Shout out to Derek Brandale. I believe he did that live.
Oh, that's
Right now?
amazing. Wow. That's really good. I'm impressed. Okay, so that was the highlight of the trade deadline, Blake. But your reaction to what the Toronto Raptors did, and then we'll get into what this means for the summer, because I think we have a ton of questions, especially with how they're going to make this all work with 3 free agents going into free agency at once.
I'll tell you right away. I am more impressed with the work Derek Brandeo has done today than the work the Toronto Raptors front office did today.
Let's go! Wow.
Damn.
But Blake, I thought we were owned by the same team the same company that owns the Raptors.
Yeah,
so I
look,
thought we can't say anything negative about the team.
That's a thing, and like the media carries Masai's water, and we won't ask him anything tough at 4. I won't ask him anything tough at 4 because I will be here on air.
Yeah.
You can hear that press conference live on Sportsnet 590 The Fan, and then we'll be reacting out of it. But I will not physically be there to shout and wave my pitchfork. Just aside.
No, people are going to throw tomatoes on the street.
Just aside.
Because they didn't trade Fred.
This
Okay, all right,
is pretty underwhelming.
Yeah, no
And
kidding, man.
More so than
Understatement.
underwhelming. You know, I think since the championship season, since the moment Kawhi left, the question has been, well, what's the path from here? What's the timeline?
Yeah.
And there was obviously a grace period of a run it back year where everything went so well, and they were kind of the best story in the league until the pandemic hit. And then the Tampa tank, everyone could get past it because, well, it's one lost year and Scotty Barnes or whoever you were dreaming on in the draft. And then last year felt more like 2019, 2020. But even at last year's deadline, we were like, okay, what's the plan, right? And you didn't have to decide as firmly because everyone was under contract. They have run basically the same thing back. They made the Thad move last year, which, you know, I don't think was a home run, but you can at least understand why they'd want to bring in a vet and slide down on the draft and Walker Kessler, etc. But you can at least understand it. Heading into last offseason, we were all kind of in the same spot of like, okay, let's find out now. Are you going this way or are you going that way? And they continued to roll it over. And patience is a good thing in general because it keeps you from making poor reactionary moves, but it can get to a point where you're too dug into what you've committed to, and somehow without committing to either path. So my biggest issue with this deadline is it feels very half measure. Obviously, they're not in a place in the standings right now where a big win now move would have made sense unless it's a star tier player with term on his contract, right? And that person didn't really move, and the ones who did probably wouldn't have wanted to come to Toronto with the quality of this team right now. So, okay, then you look ahead to, well, how can you make this team better for deep into the future if the plan is to build around Scotty? And that's move some of these OG Fred Gary pieces for big hauls that help your future look. They didn't do that. And then it's like, okay, well, then the move needs to be, how do you make your team better for, say, next year and the year after? While you have Siakam under contract still, you have OG under contract still. If you re-sign Fred, he's still in the good part of the development curve, the aging curve. And what they did with that is they paid win now prices for that small marginal upgrade for next year. Now, don't get me wrong. I love Jakob Poeltl. I think that you drop him back into a defense with good perimeter defenders. I know the Raptors perimeter defense hasn't been that good this year, but a large part of that is trying to account for the lack of rim protection. Jakob's rim protection numbers have gone down. But a lot of that is, well, the perimeter defense is gone in San Antonio. So maybe this is a great marriage defensively. Maybe having a rim runner and someone who sets actual good screens with good angles. Scotty's improved a lot with that, but Jakob immediately becomes their best screen setter, their best roll man. Maybe that stuff helps, but it doesn't help in a meaningful way to where I'm comfortable giving up a first round pick in 2 seconds. And people can feel differently about the value of first round picks and the value of second round picks. And yeah, 2024 pick is some teenager right now. He might be nothing. He might be something. And that's a trade asset you could use again in the offseason to make a deal. Those second round picks, usually end up being nothing, but 1 second-round pick gets you 20% of a Jay Crowder. I'm kidding.
I mean,
I'm kidding. But the second-round picks are useful, right?
Yeah.
Like you found Norm and you found Christian Coloco, and if you believe in those guys and your ability to draft and identify talent and develop, those picks should be valuable to you. At least such that they're not an afterthought. This trade to me seems like they treated those picks like an afterthought. Nice to get out of Kem's money for next year.
that probably cost you one of the seconds at least.
At least.
So
Because
it's really-
that's $7 million.
Yeah.
But even then, say it costs you both of the seconds.
Yeah.
A first-round pick for the right to pay Jakob Poeltl full freight in free agency.
Right.
And that deal from, what I can gather, he's going to ask for about $20 million. The Spurs were in the $15 million range. So we're probably looking at that deal ending up, 4 years, $64 million to 4 years, $72 million if we split the difference on those 2
Okay.
points.
All right.
And that's starter center money. And you just paid a first-round pick and debatably 2 seconds just to have dibs on paying him for that. Worse than that, because you didn't do any subsequent moves for the rest of this year, you're just kind of there. You're going to make the playoffs. You're not going to be a threat in the playoffs. So we can, maybe it doesn't work out this way, but I think we're done talking about Wemby and Scoot and stuff. This team's probably going to accidentally make the playoffs now.
Yeah.
They're already back in the play-in game because they won 3 games. And no one in the East can win 3 games.
Jakob Poeltl helped us with the outside too. So
Yeah. So
nice assist.
they've hurt their draft stock for this year. They've traded
Sure,
a pick
yep.
for next year. They've traded away their second-round pick this year in a draft that's supposed to be pretty good. And even if it's not that good, you can use that second to move up, to do other things. It feels like they had to pick a path. And, if it forks this way, they just kind of walk through the long grass in the middle of it. They didn't pick one of those. And we're going to continue forward where what is the talking point going to be come July 1st next year? All our shows between the playoffs and free agency. What is the direction of this team? What is the timeline? Which pieces are actual pieces of the core? It's okay to kick that down the line once in a while, but they have continued to do it. And again, it might turn out okay, but we can talk about the cap situation. They are going to be in a tough position. They do not have a lot of leverage. They do not have a lot of breathing room. And if one of Fred, Gary, or Yak leaves, and you've basically paid a first-round pick to once again be a play-in caliber team, it's going to look not great. What did we talk about at the Raptors Republic thing the other night? Part of the reason they haven't been able to develop the next wave of bench talent is because that's the legacy cost of pushing so many picks in to build up to a championship. And obviously that's worth it, but you're not winning a championship this year. It feels like they didn't want to pick a path, but they didn't want to do nothing. And so they overpaid to do a move that makes them better, but not in a serious enough way. Is this team beating Boston or Milwaukee or Philly in a playoff series?
Yeah.
No, probably
okay.
not, right?
So, okay, really quickly in terms of the cap situation, right? Because now you have 3 pending free agents. The Raptors, look, listen, this is not going to be cheap. None of these, one of the issues the Raptors have is outside of Precious, and I suppose Scotty, they don't have productive players on rookie scale deals. That really does now put you into a situation where you are going to be pressed up against the tax. And whatever, the Raptors are comfortable going up to the level of the tax, but clearly it's not a team being in a position right now where they should be paying the tax. What does it look like if they have to retain Fred, Gary, and Jakob Poeltl without trading, let's say, OG or, God forbid, Pascal?
Okay, so OG and Pascal are on the books. We'll keep Chris Boucher on the books for now. You, of course, have Scotty, Precious, Malachi. Let's do it first with no trade assumptions.
Yeah,
so,
sure, okay.
But we'll assume you waive Thad because he only has $1 million guaranteed. So we're
Okay.
trying to carve out that space. And you could probably find a home for Otto Porter Jr., but we're not going to do that just yet because you might have to pay to do that, or you might it might not happen.
Might have
you
to
might,
use
you
a
might,
second round pick to do that.
yeah,
and,
you might, or you might want to
just
keep
used it.
him or whatever and see if his toe's been located.
Okay.
So what you have already then with just those things, and I've plugged in the cap number for, let's say the Raptors pick 15th. Say they're the worst playoff team. Kind of the worst case scenario for how the season could play out, right? You're the worst playoff team and you get bounced, then you're not in the lottery. That already totals $97.6 million. The cap next year, or the tax line next year, is expected to be $162 million.
Okay.
That could change a little bit, but roughly then the Raptors are looking at $68 million and change if we don't include their first round pick. If we do include their first round pick, they've got $64.4 million. And that is Fred, Gary, Jakob, any end of roster kind of stuff. Like we're not talking about, like, that's only 10 guys. So if you re-sign those guys, that's 13. You got to get at least one more in there. So 64.4 for Fred, Gary, Jakob, and whatever you want to use of, say, the mid-level exception or in trade and stuff like that. 64.4 million to go across just those three guys does not feel like enough, does it?
That doesn't seem doable because I think Fred wants 30. Gary probably at minimum like 22. You have to think at minimum, right?
Well, what did Grange say with you guys? 490 or something like that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, that you're in the 20s there, and then of course you've now traded for Jakob Poeltl, who I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could say that, like, hey, we'll give you. I mean, what's a competitive offer, Jakob? 17, 18?
Yeah, I think 15's on the low end. Like if you go lower than 15, he probably starts looking elsewhere.
So you don't actually have leverage here.
Yeah. So if you are at, let's say you go 15, let's say you go 30 for Fred, 20 for Gary, and 15 for Jakob, which if you get those three guys for 65 million, I think you're in pretty good shape. Well, you are over the tax just narrowly, and you also only have 12 players.
Okay.
It's pretty tight, right?
It's interesting. It's interesting. Well, I mean, we can definitely see more moves, I suppose, happen at the draft and obviously in free agency and stuff like that. Of course, you can make these things happen. Before we go, I mean, I feel like we've literally done this whole show for 2 hours and we haven't really talked about what Jakob Poeltl can bring to the Toronto Raptors, mostly because we were waiting on to see the other shoes to drop. There were no other shoes to drop. So, okay, so what are the Raptors getting in Jakob Poeltl? And how has he improved since he was last in Toronto?
Yeah, they're getting a guy who obviously they know well and they like a lot, who's improved a lot since we last saw him in Toronto. Last night's game notwithstanding, because that wasn't a very good one. But he's been able to.
Yeah, why would you play that hard for a practice?
Yeah. Plus, you're trying to pad Pascal's stats for him. And what was it, like 4 of those 8 first quarter buckets were against Jakob?
Yeah, it's fine.
So he's improved the scope of his offensive role, the volume of his offensive role, but he's who he is. He's going to score on 3+ offensive rebounds a game, and he's going to be a rim runner. He probably slots in as their best screener, and that's nice. That can help you stretch the floor by vertically spacing it and having the defense suck in. It's not 3-point shooting, but it is a way to challenge the defense. And this is a guy who's 63% field goal shooter for his career because he only shoots around the net, but he doesn't shoot threes. He doesn't really shoot outside of the paint at all. So you can already understand with this team construct where those limitations might reveal themselves. I think he's probably a little bit better of a passer than Raptors fans will remember at this point. Like he can work some DHO stuff. He can kick it out when he's on the roll. Like he'll fit in well with what the Raptors want to do with their centers offensively. Defensively, it gets into a little bit of do you think that the Raptors' perimeter defense this year has declined because there's no one back there helping? Do you think Jakob Poeltl's rim defense has declined because there's no perimeter defense in front of him in San Antonio? Because last year, this looked like a perfect fit. Jakob was like one of the best rim protectors and rim deterrents in the league. Statistically, the Raptors were one of the best perimeter defenses. Both of those things have been much less true this year.
Right.
Now, you hope that you drop Jakob into a situation like this. The Raptors perimeter defenders can defend a little differently with Poeltl back there in kind of a more conservative coverage, and everything clicks together a little bit. Again, all of that is good. I think it makes you better. Long term, there's maybe some questions about, I think Poeltl, you're probably less comfortable playing in those multi-big lineups than any of your other centers, just because he really doesn't have a lot outside of the rim. And you've got Precious and Koloko developing and stuff. But near term, he makes them better.
Oh, yeah.
Question being, can you close with a 60% free throw shooter on the floor?
Yeah.
And is there a point in being better right now?
Okay, so for me, I'm thinking about it as, look, Jakob Poeltl is undeniably a very good player, right? And I think he's definitely an upgrade. I think he probably walks into the Raptors starting 5. You have to now make the decision in terms of who you take out of that group, and we'll have plenty of conversations about that. To be honest, we just don't have enough time today to talk about it, but trust me, we'll have lots of time to discuss Jakob Poeltl.
Precious, your guess off the top, though?
Yeah, probably. Well, right now, of course, Precious, but when OG comes back from injury, then I'm really curious to see who they ultimately bump back into that second group. But for me, look, he is a guy who is something that the Raptors just have not had for 3 years now, which is competent center play, who is someone who can truly handle the 7-footers out there. You've seen games this season. You know, I've been pretty upset watching games where like they're playing Memphis and Steven Adams is like throwing aside Pascal Siakam with one hand and putting OG Anunoby in a headlock with the other hand. Like it's, you know, like we have seen the specific need for a center, right? We obviously saw what happened in last year's playoffs as well. Not to say that, you know, you're bringing in somebody who is going to single-handedly shut down Mark or Joel Embiid or anything like that. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But you have now at least brought someone to play center for you. And I think for him too, it's just like he is very mobile. He is somebody who is positionally very sound. He's honestly very good at the finer points of the game. And when you look at like just his fit offensively in the group, you know, a lot of the actions the Spurs were running is very similar when you watch some of these highlights of Jakob Poeltl with San Antonio. Very similar to what the Toronto Raptors do. A lot of next action basketball, a lot of dribble handoffs, a lot of screening for the ball, and obviously, you know, playing pick and roll and stuff like that. I think that part of the game is something that he's going to naturally plug into, on top of the fact that he already played here in Toronto. So, like, I actually do think the Raptors, clearly, they like him a lot because he is a very good player.
Mm-hmm.
The overall question, and I think maybe the more tepid response from all of us here ahead of the trade deadline before we hear from Masai shortly is just like, you know, what about everything else?
What's the plan?
What is the plan? What's everyone else saying? You know, is OG going to be happy? Is Fred going to be happy? Is Gary going to be happy? Like, what is going to happen with this team? Because, again, I don't think we were looking forward to the trade deadline for answers, and none of that got answered. The only answer was welcome back Jakob Poeltl, who I don't think even left the GTA after his game last night.
No, he must. I won't give free promotion, but we know what restaurant they all went to after that game. The same one that the only one the bench mob guys have gone to their entire time in Toronto. Wow. Yeah, and what you're saying about Jakob in the offense, you could say it more cleanly. He knows how to participate in an offense with absolutely no spacing or shooting.
Well, I was going to say, I would be concerned about his lack of three-point shooting if any other Raptors center was providing any three-point shooting.
Right.
So, man, it's going to be interesting. I can't wait to break down how this team looks, starting with Friday. Who are they playing tomorrow?
Utah?
Is it?
And then
Utah tomorrow.
And then Detroit on the weekend.
on Super Bowl Sunday.
Orlando
Wow.
on
Lots of people be
Valentine's
tuning into
Day.
that one.
Orlando on Valentine's Day.
Okay, so you're telling me they could be over 500 or at least at 500 within a week?
Telling you, even if they sold, they might have accidentally made the playoffs.
All right, fair enough. Well, I guess we could say goodbye to Wemby, to Scoot, to KD, to all these other pieces.
At least we get to talk about ball now. But
yeah, well, we'll talk about ball. We'll talk about ball. But right now, I'm very confused. But anyway, we gotta go. I've been your host, Willu, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Huge thanks to everyone who helped out with this one. Obviously, Alex, JR, Blake, Grange, you know, Derek Brandale in the back, and Jennifer Olnick in the back. And yeah, we'll be back to recap the game moving forward and see how Jakob Poeltl develops in Toronto.